So I want to start with the first lecture. Sagi. Sagi is the founder and managing of Fronteg. He's developer from the soul. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So Yaniv, sorry, Sagi, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Leo. So let's jump right into things. Basically, we will talk about a change that is happening in the last decade, but we will also see how it kind of evolved during the last few decades, where security from something that was very unapproachable, very unmanageable and uncontrollable, to something that it's in the basic usage and basic control that all of us expect from any product that we use today. So a lot of exciting stuff and examples from the real world that we will cover. Let's start. And first, a bit about me. So I bought my first ASP 3.0. I don't know if anybody of you remembers that. When I was 15. Yeah, Leo, it's been a while. VB script, to the ones that remember, and started developing then. This is, I think, today I don't develop, but I would argue that this is, probably my hobby for life. So sometimes when I will be old and will have time, this is what I hope to be doing, writing code. I basically fell in love with coding that was customer facing, and because I think that developing stuff that users can just consume immediately is something that is very exciting. The ability to create value and impact in a few hours. I've been to startups. I've been to anti-startups. Been to Checkpoint for 5 years before founding Fronteg together with Aviad, who you will see and hear later. And 2 years ago, we founded Fronteg, so where we build the next generation user management platform for apps that want to be self-serve and product-led ready. And on my spare time, I like to eat a lot. The building the startup and the crave for food is not the best mix, I can tell you, but yeah, that's just the way it goes. So let's jump forward. When we look at the 90s, so starting from the decade of one slide back, from decade of the 90s, we can see that basically, if anybody of you remember, the applications split into several categories. We had some internal applications for large organizations, and we had some consumer apps. Mostly were non-SaaS, of course. They were installed with CDs. And most of the, if we jump to the security part, most of the security around those days and the interface between the end user and the security aspects would probably be at the backend side of things, or even the operational side of things. So if you needed some kind of level of security or configuration, you would reach your IT person in the organization. Usually it would be in larger organizations that actually had software within. And then they would reach the vendors. And if something was not configurable, they would probably request for some patches. And those patches would be would take from weeks in the best case to months to deliver. And after the patch, you could finally get the feature or the configuration that you really needed within within your product. So that's the idea, from end user to the IT department, through a lot of bureaucracy and processes, and then requests for features or configurations if those didn't exist. Now, jumping to the early 2000, we started to see much more interactive websites and software. So people could suddenly sign up. They could play with the products. They could change the accounts within the product. And I think that as a company, if you buy a product, you would still probably install it in using a CD. You would enter a license key and start using it. And I think that that the security, if we touch on how the interface looked back then, we would see that the end user would still have to talk to the IT department, and the vendor would probably already have, the IT manager would already have some kind of configuration, so much less customizability around the requests that weren't taken into account before that. A lot more configurations, so we would see probably more of self-service, but still for around the IT department. If we go straight to the next decade and to basically the new age of applications, we see much more modern web products. So this is the introductions to what we call sales-led SaaS. So bigger organizations would probably still have IT departments. Some of them, we already saw the introductions of DevOps methodologies, and the products would probably be much more controllable by the internal teams that we have around the company. Now, the security interface here would go from getting to IT department to the end user actually being able to ask for configurations on the security part. So that's the I think kind of the evolution that the end user is suddenly aware much more of the security configurations they need from a product, but usually they still won't be able to get the level of control that they need to actually support advanced security features and advanced configuration from the get-go. And I think that one of the interesting stories that I can tell you is when the product that we were developing for some customer, they didn't find the right roles and permissions, for example, within our product to accommodate their needs. So, for example, we had, if I remember correctly, read-only and reporter and the super admin, and they were splitting their roles in a completely different manner. They were splitting it by departments. So you would see DevOps, you would see engineering, you would see product and QA, and they wanted to create a different separation of roles. We were in a place where, okay, we heard about those kind of requests before, but now basically we had several options. So we could ignore the request and probably lose the deal. We could fulfill their request and open another role for them specifically, right? So kind of a custom hidden feature within our product. And we could probably invest and do the right way, invest in a generic custom roles and permission module within our app. Now, of course, when sales come with this kind of request to the R&D department, we all know what happens. The R&D says, okay, it will take me a few months to deliver that. In the best case, in the worst case, this could take like a year. So they tell the product, decide what kind of features you want to remove from our roadmap. And of course, the sales goes back to the customer and says, okay, we will have it. The plan was to do the right thing, to do a full generic custom roles and permissions, so the next customer would go through a smooth experience. But in practice, we ended up not doing anything, signing the deal, and of course losing the renewal for the year after. This is of course one interesting story that happens, but once a user cannot control, doesn't have the enough flexibility around the security needs and challenges that they're having, it has an effect on the business as well. So what's next? That's I think the best question here, because we see that there are a lot of experiences that have evolved but still not great, and I think that there's more and more complex requests and the requests for modifications that are happening. So I don't know, maybe observing this kind of pitfalls, sometimes it's enough and we don't need to invest more into it. So I always think that the answer here is, okay, let's look at what other great successful companies do, and if we like them and the way that the experiences that we get from them, maybe we should think of just doing whatever it is they're doing if it's working. So let's see several experiences in how other companies basically build a great foundations to enable their own customers to control security aspects within the product. Okay, so actually providing the security as an interface to the end user. First of all, let's start with this number. Okay, so Fronteg, where I work today, is dealing a lot with PLG motion, with modern applications, and the best way to provide user experience to end users. According to our survey, more than 80% of customers that use modern applications would like to have a self-serve managed experience. And of course, self-served is a lot of things. It's signing up to the product and trying it out before buying it. Is the ability to pay through the portal. But in a lot of cases, and I think this is the interesting part here, the security, if it's not being handled as something that is frictionless within products, actually becomes a huge friction in the ability to do a good process from sign up to checkout in product-led companies and in low-touch business models. And this is why, because today security is security, data privacy, all the things that around that are kind of the basic need of almost any organization. If 2 decades ago, it was something that was mostly relevant for enterprise customers, today you will see that even small startups like us, for example, need to comply to different requirements to be able to meet different standards. For example, we are SOC 2 compliant. That means that we cannot use a SaaS that doesn't have multi-factor authentication or that doesn't have the ability to separate roles within the product. Wow, okay, that means that half of the products out there, especially the early stage ones, are maybe not relevant to us. And we're a small startup, so just think of what happens when you try to sell to an enterprise. Let's continue. So, as I said, the best thing would probably be to see what the great companies are doing. So there are a few examples here of security experiences as an interface. In this example, we see security on the profile level, and I showed here an example from Slack. Most of you probably use Slack, and most of you probably like the user experience and the onboarding of Slack in a way that most of you probably never thought of, okay, what's the onboarding process to Slack, right? Because it was so frictionless and so smooth that nobody even thinks that user onboarding there is a thing. But it's a thing. It is a thing. There's a lot of thought and time of product and developer teams that are invested in creating this smoothless experience. And one of the things there is the ability for a user to manage their own profile. So if I want to set up my own passwords, of course, and my own multi-factor authentication, and maybe some settings for to see which kind of devices I signed into the product, and remove some devices, revoke some access, generate personal API keys. Sometimes it is a thing. I can do that. So the personal level security of the end user is very important, especially in modern product-led apps, where the user at the end of the day is put at the center. So it's very important to provide them on the personal level the high level of experience in terms of managing their own security. The second is the workspace level. So here we take care of the administrators. Now, the beauty here is that usually the first user within an app might be the ones that are inviting more and more members. You know, I get to talk a lot about the difference between consumer applications, B2C, that we saw a big fuss about B2C in the last decade. So people think that concepts around B2C are not relevant anymore. For example, virality. But think of it that the same concept of virality has moved basically to the B2B application, to the business application, in a way that you grow with the product because you want to invite more users, and that's the way you grow. So a smoothness ability to invite more users into the account is something that is crucial. And of course, controlling their access level, the roles, is critical. We see security policy here, an example from DocuSign that I guess some of you are using, getting into even deeper authentication policies, controlling what kind of password strength you want to allow in your product, the session timeout and stuff like that also become a standard, so you would have it in almost any product these days. Here an example from Miro, that's a great product for designers and UX people. So they even went and allowed domain control for their users to basically control which kind of domains will be allowed to log in into the same application, into the same account, sorry. ClickUp, here we can see an advanced feature, but we start to see more and more of this feature in fast-growing apps. And this is the ability to create custom roles and permissions. So remember my example from previous organizations where we had to kind of create a certain role on the backend just because a specific customer asked for that. Why? Basically, we can just expose all of the actions that are enabled within our app and let the customer create roles by choosing some permutation of these permissions. So that's an example from ClickUp, productivity tool for teams. API key management. So especially if you're a product that developers can use and automate some actions on top of it, API key management is something that is crucial. So the ability to generate API keys and control these tokens, both on the personal level and on the organization level, is becoming almost a standard today. So what else is there to control? This is only a few examples because there's a lot you can expose. So for example, enterprise SSO, which is something that will allow your more high-end maybe customers to engage with your platform through their identity providers, enabling customers to subscribe on webhooks, enabling customers to control their data. So actually GDPR is something that almost any product today needs to comply to, and the ability, the right to be forgotten, basically, is one of the core concepts of GDPR. So I need a button that will allow me to just delete all of my information from your product. So another basic activity that should be self-served. Are there any guidelines that kind of will help us create a product that will comply to all of those concepts? So let's run through to some of the stuff that we learn that and we get asked a lot by customers. First of all, if you're a B2B product, and I'm generally speaking here about business applications and not consumer apps, because their needs are sometimes a bit different. You want to support the separation, clear separation, segregation of data and configurations and user assignments from the beginning. So you want to build multi-tenancy by design. That means that within your database, within your application layer, you want to have the clear separation and ability to configure almost any configuration according to the tenant that it is relevant for. So what kind of configurations? As I mentioned, it's users, it's allowing to create roles for each and one of your customers. Of course, assigning, licensing, and subscription, feature flags to enable different features within your app, configuration of API tokens, SSO, and of course, usage analytics that is very important both on the vendor side, and today is becoming even more relevant, even exposing to the end user. The second is building an abstract level of roles enforcement. So if you think of it, we would like to enforce, to allow basically role-based access and even fine-grade authorization. And for this, we need to create some kind of infrastructure or use some kind of pre-built out-of-the-box infrastructure to create it, to allowing permission and roles enforcement within your app. And this has to be also, of course, made on the multi-tenant level. And the idea here is to enforce permissions and not roles. So you don't want to have some settings in some code that says if the user is a super admin, then allow them to access this API. What we want to do is basically enforce different keys that specify what is the action that is allowed. And this allows to create an abstraction level on the product side that will allow end customers to control and create their own roles with different permutations of permissions. Another thing is that we see a big change in something that we call an admin portal. And this is the part in your app that usually you will hit when you access the account level. So account settings or configurations or admin portal, each application calls it in a different way. We call it an admin portal. And where 10 years ago, it would have been something that is not, you wouldn't invest too much thought or effort into, because, you know, it's just configuration and settings, right? How important is the user experience there? Today, we kind of want to create a full product thought process around that. And the thought process is not only on the product side, but also in the developer side. So when developers start to develop features, it's important for them to think of how they actually allow their end users to control the different settings of these features. So it's not enough to kind of create variables in the code that allow configuration in your Kubernetes level or even on the code level, and it's not even enough to do that on the database layer. You really want to expose this kind of configurations on your UI and allow the users to control this configuration. Now, of course, there are stuff you don't want to expose to your users, and it's okay. But the way of thinking and the narrative of development should be around inverting the control. We call it the inversion of control, allowing the users to control the settings according to their own needs. So what did we have so far? We see a lot of evolution in products, the security, and the connection between products and security. And if few decades ago, security was a black box that was controllable only by the vendor. Then it moved to be controllable only by your administrators. Today, we see a movement of allowing the end users to fully control their security settings. This removes the friction of growing within an app. So product-led growth motion is becoming much easier within the product, within a business motion of a startup and of a product. We saw how it's handled within different modern applications. There are a lot of examples. So actually our team here has a department that only researches what are the best practices in providing a full independence layer for end users. And we need to choose carefully what to expose, but we should start, it should be an opt-out way of thinking. So the basic thought should be, yes, it should be controllable by the end user, and only if it doesn't make sense or poses some kind of risk, we should, opt it out. And we saw the 3 rules of building a self-serve ready application. Thank you very much. I'm Sagi. You can ping me at sagi@frontech.com, and we can discuss more of this exciting thing that is happening.